The Overwatch 2 mid-season patch was released a week ago, so today we'll be covering the third iteration of the top 500 tier list in Season 2. Is Junkrat actually broken like everyone expects? Are the new buffs enough to bring new heroes into the meta? Well, stay tuned to find out. This time we'll also be comparing the data between the Americas and Asia regions, showing some interesting differences in the respective tier lists. First up is DPS in Asia. Compared to our previous data during the hotfix patch, we can see that Sojourn is still in S tier, seeing an increase in usage despite the previous nerfs, which means we're still somehow going to need more nerfs to Sojourn. Tracer has seen a small decrease in usage, but relatively speaking, there isn't much of a difference, so she's staying in S tier once again. Our first notable hero in this patch is Widowmaker. She's increased in value by roughly 100 points, most likely due to the fact that Overwatch 2 has increasingly been leaning into tank heroes without shields, and in turn bringing spotlight to heroes with higher solo kill potential. If that's not the case, it's probably just the aimbot. Anyways, the preference towards Widowmaker has affected other hitscan and sniper heroes, namely Cassidy, Ashe, and Hanzo. These three heroes have gone down in point value as a result. If we also consider the current map rotation, 3 out of the 4 maps that are not part of the rotation for Season 2 are Widow favorable, so it's not too late to pick up Widow this season to prepare for Season 3. Torbjorn and Junkrat are for sure no longer off-meta heroes. They've shown decent usage since the first competitive season, and despite the meta changes in Season 2, they're currently displaying outstanding performance. On top of that, Echo is very likely to escape being an off-meta hero as well. In our recent community post running the Overwatch One Trick World Cup, she has also shown some outstanding popularity rate of 37%. Meanwhile, Sombra and Reaper, who were S tier picks in Season 1, have plummeted down the tier list. Sombra received some heavy nerfs, so this one makes sense, but who the heck knows what happened to Reaper? I guess removing the movement speed DPS passive was just enough to put him in the gutter. Since Kiriko and Ana are powerful picks in Season 2, it's only going to get worse from here. Meanwhile, the biggest difference in the Americas is that Soldier is in B tier instead of D tier. There are some differences across the board in terms of point value, but the general direction of the meta seems to be the same across the regions. Junkrat, Torbjorn, and Echo are also decent picks here as well. Another interesting thing between the two regions is that in the Americas, Bastion is in C tier, while in Asia, he's in D tier. In both regions, the usage is increasing among top 500 players, but it's by a minuscule amount, so we might be reading into things a bit too much, but nevertheless, it looks like the small change to his ultimate might have had some sort of difference. Widowmaker in Americas has also increased in point value in the past 3 weeks, reducing playtime for Ashe, Soldier, and Cassidy. This means for sure that Widowmaker is a top meta pick, where all the regions are being flooded with hackers. Back to Asia for the tanks, a ton has changed since the last patch. The most controversial tanks, Orisa and Roadhog, actually aren't that high in point value here. Roadhog especially seeing a huge drop in usage. I'm honestly surprised that Orisa isn't S tier, and it's very likely that Orisa is only being used as a counterpick to Roadhog. Through their point values, we can infer that Asia has found other methods of countering Orisa and Hog, but how, you ask? We can speculate based off the increased usage of Wrecking Ball and D.Va. At least before the mid-season patch, it felt like Ball and D.Va didn't have much counterplay against Orisa, leading to a reduced point value. But leading into the new patch, both Ball and D.Va players are finding some new playstyle to make the heroes viable. But really at the center of all the attention is Winston. Without any kind of new buffs, he's shot back up to S tier like in Season 1. For the same reasons as the Season 1 meta, Winston can mark the enemy Sojourn and expand the space for the ally Sojourn with his dives and bubbles. Although Lucio Kiriko meta has shifted to Ana Kiriko, the same strategy remains valid and has only increased his survivability. This also explains why D.Va and Wrecking Ball are seeing an increased usage. In fact, it's probably the more likely reason than the one previously mentioned. D.Va and Wrecking Ball are just great heroes to contest the Winston after all. In other words, Winston is a key to the current meta in Asia. But wait, there's more. Let's take a look at Sigma. Sigma doesn't have a way to mitigate Winston's damage, so in theory, he should get countered by Winston and make it really difficult for Sigma to find playtime during Winston metas. Despite that, Sigma is seeing a noticeable increase in points, so at least in Asia, the tank meta is looking pretty balanced. However, the recently buffed Zarya and Junker Queen haven't seen the fruits of this patch just yet, and Reinhardt is still in the dumpster. Before we switch regions, let's take a quick look at Asia's support tier list. The Kiriko Ana usage has stabilized at the top. Ana especially is playing a key factor in the current meta, contributing across roles to the tanks as well. Her Biotic Grenade is playing a huge role in shutting down Roadhog, and Winston greatly benefits from her usage as well. Mercy managed to retain her usage in the midst of all this. Looking back at it, she's been holding her ground since Season 1. Unfortunately, it feels like she's really been dumbed down as a Sojourn pocket. In D tier, Brig hasn't got much value from the patch just yet, and Moira has seen just a little bit of value, but that's just Asia. In Americas, things are completely different. Let's take a look at the tanks first. The tier list barely shares a resemblance to Asia. Roadhog and Orisa are by far the most used heroes in top 500, while Winston struggles to find footing. Unlike Asia, Orisa and Hog are the key meta heroes. It's actually not a huge surprise that the metas across the two regions are different. We can see this in Season 1, and even going further back, across the majority of Overwatch 1, excluding the Ghost meta. Asia shows a higher preference for dive and coordination-oriented metas, while Americas prefer heroes with shields and individual carry potential. The root cause of this pattern is because, well, no one actually knows. Just to take a guess, it could be a difference in ping and how each community perceives how the game should be played. If we really wanted to get factual, we could discuss the difference in traditional values between the East and the West, talking about how the West tends to have a more individualistic culture, while the East tends to be more collectivist. Call me a nerd if you really want, but it's really interesting how we can see this reflected even in Overwatch. It's not really our problem, but poor Aaron Keller. Imagine trying to balance while keeping the differences in the regions in mind. So let's try to give the devs a little bit of slack. Anyways, back to the tier list. Ramatra has doubled in score, and I think Asia could take some notes for this one. Although Winston and D.Va hasn't seen an increase, Wrecking Ball is starting to see some spotlight. Aichi, who's part of the KROW team, hit rank 392 and back down to Masters. But based on his experience, Ball is fairly playable against Hog. If you mark the Hog each time he has to hook, it's apparently not bad at all. You just gotta roll over for some boops with a tick and attack and just talk and a tick, but if you accidentally tick talk, the Americas also traditionally has a tendency to reflect patches very quickly, but despite that, Junker Queen and Zarya haven't really seen that much change. Orisa during the previous hotfix increased by 160 points in 7 days, but you don't see the same effect occurring with Queen and Zarya, so the outlook on these two heroes isn't looking the brightest. The support tier list is also very different than Asia. Ana doesn't get as nearly as much value here, losing out to Lucio and Mercy. This really shows the preference in our region to increase the tank's value with speed boosts like in Season 1, but regardless, Ana's point value is most definitely increasing. So if you're in the American servers, it might pay off to try out duoing as a Winston and Ana right now. But to summarize, in both regions, the DPS meta is pretty similar across the board, but the tank support meta is highly contrasting. In Asia, the players are out coordinating Hog and Orisa with Winston and Ana, but in Americas, the individual carry potential of Hog and Orisa outshines the other cast, and for supports, Lucio and Mercy that increase Orisa's value is preferred. But this explains why the devs haven't been so quick to nerf/rework Roadhog just yet. It makes sense for Americas, but not so much for Asia. We'll have to keep watching to see if the devs can manage to satisfy both communities. Hope this tier list video helped, and I'll see you guys soon with some gameplay analysis from Dallas Fuel Hanbin's Junker Queen. This was Sapling from KROW Overwatch, signing off.